Good morning, Genrenpati Tashitale, and good morning, Katrina, and welcome to all of our. We'll begin with some preliminary prayers. You can find the links to those in the chat box.
We cannot hear.
And now transcend and destroy the one that is gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one not to bliss, nor the world never be. Teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings in when I was supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop, a dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn, Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah, 他 Jason.
Jason. Oh yeah. Oh, yeah, no, did it. Oh, the young Timberson get some dead and dollars on good. Oh, yeah. Tumnam dig by chewy mistresses. Timberson get some dead and Jason word. Tumnam dig by chewy mistresses. Tumna dig by chewy mistresses. Droid to me chag messelas. Droid to me to chag pass in Shanda Tapsi Medusungora. Dig by chewy trailer so what it is any tray or matters. Tumna dig by chewy miss. Droid to me to Korang chag pass in Doni meba soya Medusungora. Droid to me charge messelas. Niji Toba Shala Pomede. Sanji Chumde de Rani. Toba Tarshimba. Pangba da Yende Tarshimba Rete. Ti Pangdo Yende to the Shalpa Trene. Chivichil Pevanashi. Tinepa Kesi Tuchelpa. Train Bendusung Yara. Niji Toba Shala Pomede. Pangdo Yende Yonaya Teso. Tungele Tre Pangba. Tungele Trevetani. Langdurjine Maluba Shimbe Kimba. O Teso Yonaya. Shalapa. Poya Medusung Yardo. Rally Yuba de Pa do Stasha at Meduswara. Niji Tokba Shala Pomedis. Neta Tapshika rest, Tumba Sanji Chumden de Rani, Randu Person Chopade. Pangba Person Chop, Jim Yamambata, Mishiba Mombaka Pa. Landur Ginetam Jake, or Kimba Tarshibarete. Ina Tigi. That she had Jesus on the Shala Pendo Chitrugo. Shen Chesu Zimbe Yondese Rampando Tarchina, Shenlia Te Chesu Zine, Rangi Tobe Yondet Zulian Gueg, Tabshinangura. Oh, the Shen Chesu Zimbe Tabdulia, Chini Tembatem Betrover and Juruse. The church in Nelu Monetus Gora. Chini is a church near Nelu, Temba Karina, Nesu Mone Karina, or Titember, and it tore Chetu Gordon. Marazu Chigi Nesu, Rang Samlatanda, Shala Samlatanda, Wabola Tata, Tondachi, Ganga Norde Gordon. Oh, did Tata did Marin did or did Samla Ditan Jovan Ditan Gurespa, and it's Lamgatani. Chuni Tembatembe, George Sunguda, or the Robsilan, yeah.
So here, as the Buddha says from the sutras, sages do not wash away sins with water. So here, the sages, the Buddhas, can't just sort of wash away or get rid of our negativities like you would wash away something with water. Nor does it continues, do they clear away beings' sufferings with their hands. It's not as though Buddhas have the capacity to just take away, eliminate the sufferings of beings with their hands, or by sort of washing away their negativities can eliminate those sufferings. Nor do they transfer their own knowledge to others. A Buddha has the complete kind of realizations, has culminated all of the kinds of good, excellent qualities, has completed the realizations and abandonments to attain that state of Buddhahood. But even though a Buddha has such qualities of realizations and abandonment, has this kind of perfection of knowledge and so forth, he is not able to just transfer those to others, to give them to other beings. So here one asks, what is the method then? A Buddha has achieved this kind of state of excellent qualities with all knowledge and so forth, all knowledge of what is to be adopted and what is to be abandoned, but they can't just transfer that to others. They can't just give that away. But rather, as the last line of this sutra verse says, they liberate by teaching the truth of reality. So in order to give those realizations to others or elicit them in others, the Buddha teaches the actual nature of reality, what it is that is true, or how it is that things exist. So the normal way that we sort of think about things and think about others, perceive the world, the Buddha shows us how that is mistaken. And then by teaching the way that things actually are, we can liberate ourselves. This is the method by which a Buddha is able to benefit other sentient beings.
Oda Kasoro. Chu Kangala Soba. Chu Kangala Soba Tezul Trishan. Tibeta Vive. Oh, Tendre, Samlo Tendre. chöleya sanje chumdendegi chöle shambati ngadu sonzu yordo. Ta chidang kora digba yinba samlo korne. Tiji ta na samchu kangal chuche na ko kewaji de sagir to. Digba kora digba yinba ngunji cheche chube ishirab cheche chuche na ko zawane mebe bada mara tozi de pengiri to. Tena ko ti digba yonsba ta ne ti chuche te samji nangba kelingi oma to. Sokbo wi timadiji na ko chi chune tagiri de te samji tagimari ti zo mara songo yordo. Tumna digba chi me chushes. Digba singede soso semgi sakba digba sonza. Semliga shenla tsawa chebala soba. O tinde chene digba sak yordo. Tinde ko digba tanya tabdiya semliga shenla tsawa chebe soyotelia. Tine tiba paane shenla penba chuba. O pensim chambada nyingji chanjugi semla soba. O tinde tonani digba takba chegurumado. Chi cholam te chibugi digba tatugumare songo yordo. Ane tina shi sanje chumdende tardu ju yende nga wate rangdunji kusikdwa nga zo. Pangba dang tokpe yende maluba rangi tuju la tsokpa de rangdunji kusik. Kansa rangi tarshimba nyuwe kuri de wardo. Ta shenla pa tenya ke nga su shenla pendo zeban ze tungwe chawa che tungwe de sugu de rawa. Kansa ke namba cheche pa kusu yunge teni zeya yuwa tonya yuwa tira. Tele shendunji kusikdwa. Ote tienane zeba chodu jubade shene labje sungye dirba. Zeba kunle sungine zeba cho yinse. O ti de ko sungin zeba de gechembure. O tilia chunyi temba tembe chowari gyuruse dirba. Ti kechembure ese. Ti nganzu di dona liang yungu yuba. Sibe sungu chujemla ngeni kecha namla tense. Dunga din doye gyudi nge kyunzulya ten yoyose rangi nyamsu nyone kene sine shibe sungu chuyi nge kija namate tishin shikba tenpa desi tishin shikba ki lenge sina medu chale ki nge tsowote ni shenliya rangi shinshi kimbe yonden zuzu shenlipa langdur ki ne toyen tere sogora tili lakba chigi chagi dunga seyala soba tindi yomar sogora tishin shikba tenpa de kecha namji chago sose che ma she ne sheba de rangi nyemba samji de mares toba che de tonda soso samluta sheba che she sona o tina shin nyamle che de tina shin che tabshi che nyamso lemba o tile che ne pengire songo wardo o ti chunga.
So here, like if we have something that is dirty or stained, you can wash that away with water in order to purify that. But our negativities are not like that, as it explains here. A Buddha can't just wash away those negative actions with water in the way that you would do something with form, something that is material, but rather it is by understanding that negative actions are negative, that they are non-virtuous, and having some sort of level of belief in that one is able to elicit a kind of change. So Buddhists don't accept that one is able to just purify in the way you would something material by washing it with water. Rather, we need to work with our mind and understand the way in which those actions that are harmful to others are non-virtues and are going to lead to suffering. And so too, then realize the benefits of actions that are beneficial to others, developing love and compassion and so forth. It's really not as much about one's external actions, but about working with the mind. And so when it comes to the enlightenment of a Buddha, there is the sort of a culmination of their own aims, meaning the Dharmakaya, that enlightened wisdom. And the way in which they are then able to work for the benefit of others is through the form body, through taking a form or an aspect wherein they can teach to other sentient beings, have that kind of encounter with others. And among all of the activities of a Buddha, the supreme among them, is the teaching of the Dharma, is the speech of the Buddha. And so that is, as it says in another sutra, like the Buddha explains that I teach the path that eradicates the sort of miseries of samsara, but it is up to you to actually practice that. So again, the sort of method by which a Buddha is able to benefit others, the main sort of responsibility, the main action of a Buddha is to teach others what is proper and improper. So it's not as though a Buddha is able to do for us, but we have to, based upon hearing, learning about these things, then contemplate them for ourselves and actually put them into practice. That is the way in which we are able to be benefited by the teachings of the Buddha. They can't do it for us.
Oh, the Karsore, Garazo Tiba Mambuchi, Sasha Yordo, and the Junjunal Songuba. Chena Gonchilipe, member room ne Chabata, Chichepe, Nagucha de Yuna, Kapkabliane, Lord Kuni, choose them, Yunza, Lord Kunania, Nishuka, Seba Tungurua. But then she carbucho de, give some lute. Sangang Nabuchitene, the cup Kichireza, Lord Joanna, she is so good. Mancha Senacol Naguche, David de Sudi, Tiba Mancha, Savio, so good. Or Tindico, some Lia, gave some luchu to wear some luda, then they use them use a coate, Sanjagi too, when Chen Yambata, other than Richi, Paxaraja says, those ya, give some of the use them, the Gigmar so good. Chesa ti indu ngarazu kanga kewa pe top chunju tikba di top chembo ke chen de sama kewa thoma meba na o tende che yon de yordo o ti indu kasura ti shi sanje to chan chi de so de de kewa nyam churu ba ni la tu ta do tikba di top chembo re so wara teni zongwe je de tikba de zu pa ta e thapshi kari oresena 탑시 초도 겨르바데 잠바다 자와 자주고 셈 셴뱅게 삼로 거야데 로 티바 망차와데 가주 셈젠다 지소날 때네 때던 론디체니 티바사위와라 샬라 차와체네 차도다 가제단 전셈다 딘데샤네 티바사위와라 딘데코 토졸 네베르 수규베 지소날 때도 코 셈젠을 때 티바사위요데 네 셈젠리아 잠바다 자와 동해다 tren드다 대화다 tren드 아니 저도 기와초나 자주게 셈제게 대트룹 통게 단단단네 셈제게 대트룹 소아파 대트룹 대림예 샤니베 타르쳔바 셈제게 대트룹을 톡바맹게 로 동해세와라 톡바맹게 대르께 고세 연대군dengi 산제진 요나 섬 자주게 셈 상보 딜레 학바지게 대과다지게 탑시메 송거도 Tindu Garazo, Tikba Tayeta, Kewa Pusum Sokbati, Chisonal Tedu Shanlia, Samba Sambuche, Trado Meba, Naje Meba, Jansi Meba, O Tindekone, Kewa de Topshabutine Yongura, Tikba Manshava Tidu Sagdoa, Tindu Shanla Savachene, Marumbe Semchane, Shanla Cheve, Marumbe Semchambal, then Tikba Sagware. Tindu Ta Shanlia, Sawa Meba, the Pemba Bashi Trumdugi. Chambada Niji Chanju Samla Soba, Tendel, and it was Tagre, take what Tagbe show the Kubati in Songdoa. Oh, yeah.
So, therefore, we have accumulated in the past many non-virtuous actions, much negative action, as it is described in the Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. This sort of like having a virtuous thought is like a flash of lightning in the long dark of a night. Most of our thoughts are not very positive, not very good, and so to have a kind of virtuous dharmic thought due to like meeting with the teachings of the Buddha is something that is incredibly rare. So it's likened to like this long, dark night. Most of our actions are negative, and there are those small moments, those flashes, wherein, due to the awakening of imprints of having met the Dharma, we give rise to kind of virtuous thoughts, virtuous actions. And so recognizing that the power of non-virtue is quite strong, we are so habituated to that, and the power of our virtue is in relation quite weak. We need to make an effort to try to purify those kinds of negativities that we have accumulated and really make effort at positive actions. So the sort of highest, the best way to purify our negativities really is to develop love and compassion, those kinds of beneficial attitudes toward others. When we think about the ways that we accumulate non-virtue, it's in relation to other beings for the most part. Out of our competitiveness and pride and jealousy and anger and so forth, we accumulate those non-virtues. So to purify them, to counteract that by developing love and compassion, that kind of highest attitude of bodhicitta, wherein we want to bring about the welfare of others by sequentially working toward that state of complete, perfect enlightenment, where we are really, truly able to benefit them most completely. This kind of attitude is extremely powerful in purifying those kinds of negativities and in developing positive sorts of imprints. So on a day-to-day basis, while we are in society, this is something that we can work on, trying to not engage in those kinds of attitudes of pride and jealousy and competitiveness and harmful kinds of attitudes, recognizing that those improper sorts of minds are going to bring about suffering, and instead try to rely on the antidotes, develop love and compassion and this attitude of bodhicitta. This is a really powerful method for developing a kind of positive attitude and also purifying our negativities.
Keba tuma rabgun jeba ye tuwa namjin dingi pembar siwise. Keba mangbolia shen simjen la tsawa pa pembar chukrwa. Ane tunge tamje de trawar cha. Tewa tamje dan dembar cha nyamdo. Keba mangbolia tele tsuane besu nani. Tunge de trawa da tewe chidu besu nani shune. Rwa. Ane tada tarshimbe kibu kibu san keba tuzoge. Keba mangbolia rangi nyamyo la tene o kongye de karu kombarsine. Keba tuma rabgun jeba ye tuwa namjin dingi pembar siwise. O dini shen simjen la chamba da tsawa. Ane takbe shen cheba la soba. Shen bengi takbe shen cheba chanju gu sim. O dini tanga razuli penye chokdo kyoba. Dikba taya da tso saya ge chokdo kyoba. Sanje ji koban toya ge kyoba tumu mayimba di tiri te orton. Chanju gu sim ki sin so na. Ane tongi tokbe shiro la soba tezo sanje ge kyolan ruyo ra. Chanju gu sim me na. Tongi tokbe shiro yo na ya. Sanje ji koban tobe kyolan ruyo mardo. Tarwa tobe kyolan ruyo meto. O te idu tanga razo karishen gura sana. Sanje ge son shabe son liya. Teba che, samba che. Te tene yana yando kumri che. Te yana ko chizo nal te duza. Susu nyeri nyeri mese nal ya. Simje da rondi chebe kabli ya. Lebi ya tabshi che gura. Che di te gan lep kuyo ra. Te nal gyuju ji chinje. Ani ngarda mendra arali ya samlu tang dada. Mi shenda dem rondi chidu samlu tang dada. Cheba che dan la soba. O tezo yar rutu na ani chögi chi pengi ora. Tezo ngema na shin te keba ken rugu medo na ani chögi shiragi pengi o marwa. Ti nga zi loshon tosu na yungu doa. Kasi mambu la imba. Pen takbe cho nga ra zi shen pen taya cho di chö she labja kya de. Sen de zam yi rang tang shen pen. Kiwa chima pen jale pen. Chö she de resa. Di pen taya de. Cho do kiwa. Da pen to ma do de pajo de liya samlo lun gyurwa chen do suna ani pen to waris kola cho shen. Kaze shen na ku pajo de samlo ngema na shi chigwa de do na kola cho shen na ke pacha de shagri ma do pen ge to yo marwa. O di indi ngara zo sanje ge sombe cho le toba da samba chen ani kar sore. Rimji tarwa da tamje kemba. O tinde ran liya sanje cho sombe de pen to wa chen nyamli chen. Tarwa da tamje kembe koban chine kya tobar cha. Dechi do cho nye nyambe. O kulun se tamne sambar shu siya. O dinde.
So here, as it is said, the Buddha, meditating for many eons, came to see the benefit of this attitude of bodhicitta, saw that this sort of mindset was of supreme benefit. This thought, wishing that all sentient beings be freed from suffering and that all sentient beings have happiness, this kind of attitude of cherishing others, of wanting to work for their welfare, this is the supreme beneficial mind. The Buddha saw this through his own experience and then teaches this to us. And so any kind of activity, positive, virtuous activity that we engage in that is held with bodhicitta goes toward the cause of Buddhahood. But if we lack that, even if we meditate on emptiness, that is not going to be something that goes toward the cause of Buddhahood. We need to have that sort of attitude of bodhicitta infusing all of our actions. So it is based then upon hearing the teachings that we implement this in our own life. We have to have the Dharma sort of arrive in our lives, actually impact the kind of actions, the interactions that we have with others. This is the way that we create a kind of change. If our behavior, if our actions, if the way that we conduct ourselves improves, then we can see that we are really benefiting from the Dharma. We are going toward that goal. And so the supreme way to help others, to bring about their benefit, is also through the advice that we give. Whether or not that's actually beneficial is really dependent upon the person who receives it. Do they put it into practice? We can say teachings that are beneficial, but whether or not that is of benefit, I mean, we're going to be laying down imprints, but it's really about whether or not that other person takes that up. So here, recognizing that we want to be able to attain such a state, we should think that we are going to, in stages, by listening to the Dharma, by contemplating and meditating on it, we are going to strive for the state of Buddhahood, for liberation and complete enlightenment. And in order to do that, we are going to listen to the teachings. So please take the time to set a positive bodhicitta kind of motivation for listening to the teachings.
This one. Oh, yeah. Don't I need you to do it? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't I do some delays? Oh, there is it. That doctor said, need you maybe I said him, but doctor said, did it. Oh, yeah. That doctor said, need you maybe I said, sure can't in a row. Pumba Kawasichi, Moborelli Miri Tagiora. The Karas did not call Chetu was like Betil Mena, Kanel Epshana, Pajo de Hako, Shedo Tanya Tagiora. Ming the man, and it gets a share Yomara, Kubara to stem at the Ming Churel community Tagiora. O Delia Ming Taba, Taudes. Minjita until managing them all the Pumbari, the Kawari, the Miri, the Kambari, the Chokseres, Tanya Kaga so shares social. Oh, Tilia, Ming the task on the Penangazu Desa, the Ilia, Kambas Ming Tagiora, Kambas Ming Tagiora, Tinashin, Titondi, Kambares, and Kamba Nyabelo Chigiorno, Titapa Sigora. Kangbe Ming Tapare, Kambas Lue Tapare. Jidang Tanyel, the Tapataga and Ribare. The Kambares, Yonsu Traza, Tagat Samas Zingurmado, Tele Lavaji, Kamba Yinda, and Lucares, Sajutaka Yomarwa. The Tak Nurse, Tapete, Kambate Sugura. Tage Simbare, Tage, Yuzu Zobarakura, the Kambares, the Kamba Candes, Chegan Rotation, Yaka Yomargo. Zekwe Yomar, Jidengi Tanya do you said, Madame Majeba Taba, some Shaya de Remado. The Hamaguna coming Tagura. Combachino, combat Cavallos, Hamaguna, the day or a day or a say, Taja Chevrati, Hakosana, that Tasara Hakosarwa. That Tagbet and that is a Yomarwa. But the Chidan say Yomar Tendesi Yomarwa. No. Doctor say, need you maybe a church conditioner. Mingji Tasha Yor, Korang Dakshi, Chasher of Chimambochilia. Rene Chena Korama Imbechilia, 냠도 domne tesu charol teni mingi tasho tesamgi yesu sogbore tanyedo yoba se tirese o tetabi tanyedo yobe tonde sene nye yo marese nye yo nani rangune yoba se tiregore di kambare se ya di kansa res pata pumbunga bukarul tenro tati sene nye yo na o dire sha se de kambene to de mare sigba mare saba de mare di mare chala re ne mare dire sha se chik mixe tenju yo na ani tagdo sene nye ju yo ba se ura tagdo sene nye ba se tine ta rangune yo ra kamba se de kambe dakshile tene takpa tsa mare kura rangune yo ba re ru yo ra o chetan di uma tenju yo lo che kaya rangune yo mare do di tagdo sene nye ju yo na ani rangune yo kura tagdo sene nye ju me na rangune me be te res 매배 tonda mare ye me se di te ngel ta cho sarwa di karse di khangba sigri se ale di khangba re do ase ani kansa jilep suna di palar ba palar da ase taga ta cho sa di ye mai de tne ta cho bre jiden thanye di ju de so sar ro ka pala kande se de sig de ne ya che ke de ne ani tak do je ge ora tene ta ra ya yo mare se ora tak do je ne ni ju me ba se ho ti ji ya
So here, picking up in the text, this is on page 26 in the English. We're at this point of the unfindability of the imputed object. So here we have all kinds of objects in the world, like a pot and a pillar, and each of these various things we give a kind of name to be able to identify that thing, to be able to communicate it to others, like, oh, this is a table or this is a pillar or whatever it is. If we don't give those kinds of designations, we can't communicate. We're just sort of left kind of sitting there stupid. But when it comes to the sort of naming, designating various objects within the world, when it comes to the way that those things exist, like for example, we take a house, the place where we live, we call this a house. And so when we look at that, we then think house. But when we are, so we designate with this name, with a term, as well as a concept, like thinking that sort of thought. And so that which is renowned within the world as being a house, that kind of mere name is the extent of the existence of that. If we were to try to then find within this basis of designation the thing that is the house, we're not able to actually find that thing. So when not investigating and not analyzing in that way, like someone asks, oh, which house is yours? And you say, oh, that's my house. That level, we can talk about the existence of a house. That's totally fine. The conventionally sort of existent thing, this name that is designated on a collection of parts, but that is the existence of it, like saying like this is a house or this is an ox or whatever it may be. But when we try to then search for the thing designated, what one is searching for is something that exists from its own side, exists in its own right, independent of that process of designation. So if there were something that could be found, it could be identified, it would have to, again, be something that exists from its own side, not merely designated by a term and concept, but rather something that sort of exists in its own right. So not being able to find that is not asserting total non-existence. We have to, again, remember what we're talking about with existence and non-existence. For something to not be found through this method of analysis does not mean that it's completely non-existent, but it means that something which exists from its own side, independent of that kind of process of labeling and designation, is unfindable, and therefore there is no such existence in its own right.
Oh yeah. Tadira Toma deshe ko des na ta do che ni ju mebe ko la she go do. E tambo de deji ha ko che wo de se go do. Tukta ma wa nam je tene tu che ba da. Tukta ma wa chama ke tene tu bu re se ro ro. O tende se ya te se go do. Tende she ba de. Tene tu che tukta ma wa nam je tene tu che ba da. Rawa do ma du che ba de la se. Kasheke tene trubarese, rawadu matrubarese, Kasheke tene trubure, rawadu truburese, Tango ma tujuni rawadu trubsigdo, Umatenju and the Chinbeneko, Rangune matrusigordo, Rangingone trubumarese, Truda Mawa Namje Tene Tru Chebata, Rawadu Madru Cheban Dilase, Dindrave Sigma on Danayase, oh, Tune Truba Re, Tune Truba Re, Lava Yenayako, Tuba said the local Tube Subchichu Mabu Yora, Ko Rawa Yore, Rawadu Yoba Resina, Rawadu Yose Mabu Yora, Marazu Mila Rawa Yore, Rawa Mendu says Dua, the Rawan Dindi Cheshore says Yora Mado. Rawa yore se mise kanga kanjuba kanga checho marwa ko rawa le rawa ki che da bade yo no rawa yo bata che de chida ko chida ne tene tu bare rawa du tu mare se la yena tongba ni shebe ngeba yo mardo ngoma to zo la la gurdo o tene tu gure se suchil ma de ne tu de yo mare se se gure de ko rawa de che shora o ma tenju ar jine tene tu gure se Rawadu Tugubares, Koran Rangwene, you may cheer your marto. Shenda didn't tend to live at Tanaba, Shawa some Shagudwa. Sekotara Mabu your race, got a touch on that. Timber mess and a timber mebe, Tara Mabu Yoshorwa, Karina and I see timber mess, got a say. No dinner. Then a troop chip at the round, the Madu chip and Dilla, and they did Sigma or Dana Yase. Chizamshi temba da tebe chedase, kote se de kajeji temba da kajeji togi yobata, roa. Yo tinde kanda kala tembar, kala matembar yobe rawa se, shala matembar yobe rawa tele ya, ane ko sechi yore sora, matembar yobe tele ya, mune. Oh, kasre. Madeba yobalaya rawadu yose, tara tumashi yobese. O kane rawadu yose, rawa yose wata, rawadu madu sewata, chikba labgi yonayako, tara yose sedele, tawata rawa mabuchi keba yore sigara. Rawadu yose, tara tumashi yobe. Rawadu tube, tongshi mawa dranaya, tongzula tara tumba yodose. Rawadu tube, Jujin la Madeva Rawadu Trubata yo Marese, Conduga Sigre, Ngoma Sigre, Tina ko Jujin la to Maguba, Samlia Yana Rawadu Yose, Tinde yo Maresigrido, O Tindico Tara Mabu Yungres, Omateyo Rawadu Madrusid, Rangune, Sene Chinia Mabatel Sigora, Shen Bashil Tune, the Shen Tashida, Dogil Tune Bashitro Mado. Koran di yin se rangwene yinba chiga raya yo mardo. Tala rawadu matu sigara. Mado chujin le to maguba kora taasi yungre se rawadu matu se ten samla sig mardo. Ya o di chilana. Tara tuma yo dos ya.
So here then it says, from the beginning, you need to understand the following. So here it's important to understand the way in which, so it continues saying, when the different Buddhist philosophical schools speak of something being established dependently or of something not being established independently, they are using similar terminology. So here, in order to understand this point about the unfindability of the imputed object and what it means for something to lack this kind of independent existence, we need to understand that the realists, like the Sutra school and so forth, and the Madhyamikas, the Prasangikas and so forth, are using similar terms, but there are different levels of subtlety involved. For the realists, for example, they speak about something being established dependently in the sense that it doesn't have independence from its causes and conditions, that all things are reliant upon their causes and conditions. But this is not the same kind of level of subtlety that is understood when the Prasangikas assert that something is not being established independently. So here we could talk about like when we speak of independence, there are sort of many levels of autonomy or like being able to do what you want. But this is something that we need to be aware of because the terms used by these various schools are quite similar, but what they intend by them or the kind of subtlety is differs quite dramatically. So here it says, however, they differ in the extent of the dependence and the range of independence they assert, with some views being more coarse and other views being more subtle. So therefore, when they similarly use the expression being empty of being established independently, their positions range from gross to subtle. So here, again, there are many different levels of subtlety when we get into a lot of these terms, like not being established independently or being established dependently. We need to understand in which context it is being asserted, by who it is being asserted. It is also true for like the term true establishment or not being truly established. There's also different levels of subtlety that come into the various schools that assert that. And so when the realists say that something is not established independently or is established dependently is the language they would use, they are asserting that it doesn't exist independent of its causes and conditions. However, they aren't going into the level of the prasangikas who would say that there's no sort of independent existence in the sense of the thing designated and the basis of designation, and those levels of interdependence, which are much more subtle than just cause and effect, are the assertions of the prasangika school. So despite the similar language, we need to understand the different levels of subtlety.
Oh yeah, just right. Oh yeah, tango mawa nam yesudo. Mawa ta chiruba kanga yungure nangba semjaba meje kanga yungure to. Chitra mawa don do deba semjaba kanga. Mawa nam yesalu jangba tabu kyujin la tenje tene keba kyusendo chenese. Mawa tsoge ngobo karina kyudan kenle tene kesona ko rangwene chi yogore segora. Rangwene chi mena ne kyujin le tene su keya ke medo asegora. Rangwene kyudan kenle tene kena rangwene chi yogore peke chi tseni nye yoba chi yogore segora. Kyusendo chene jangba tsewe rangwene rangshingi truba tsuktuba dire se che chi tenju chi yogore segora. Yoban diolas. Tenju ane kyudan kenle tene keba sonza kyudan ken tsokpa le tene ko lubur to cheba chili ane tanya tane di dis chepa tanya tau yordo. Taba sonza tenju ane tele do dese kyujin le tene keba sonza tenjin debar jowa sonza rawa to tsu keba to yo ma rese rangwene tsu keba to yo ma rese. Kita tele do de shegre soda. Tele do de salu jangba tabu kyujin na tsobo tumen jowa la teba le rangi ngo nye batase. Ane nyebe drebu nyugu te yaase. Rangi ngo tukir wa tuwe. Ne rangi ngo yebe nyugu te ya. Ane chashe na soba she. Tele tene ane nyugu spa ta shagri mato. Tina ne chik di nyugu diris chashe che na raya ke yo mardo. Drebu nyugu te ya chashe na soba tuma shi yoba le. Chashe te dale kato da yibda teme ki chale soba kaya nyugu imba che raya yo mare se ora. Trada tokbe. Ti mena ya chashe te zole tene trada tokbe. Ane di salu jangba se pa ming ta shaba de. Ane takwa tsamgi rangi ngo yusu tsokba de esi gora. Tenjuwa che na. Takwa tsamgi yusu tsokba le. Ane tsokba le tadun te matsimba che. Tenjuwa che na. Takwa tsamgi di nyugu re sa o ti re sa. Di kangba re sa o re se taga shawar mato. Ti matsimba che ne ya chik. Sene raya yoba tende yo mare sigara. Tadun te ma chimbar se, te ma drigba. Chimbar se, te drigba ma se, tada chi yogore se na. Ma chimbar di jangba she, takbe, jangba di kanyi she tse na. Chashe re re wada tsokba kanya, jangba yinba she nyeju mebe, rawado trube cha tuyusam ya meba dola se, o tere da tunda. Numa mawa tsoge, gyudan kyanla tene keba sonza rangwani chi yogu re sigwara. Tengyo azuza gyudan kyanla tene so yonde ko lubur zu chi chubu yonde on tele ya tanya takba tsambre mato rangwani chuba yo ma re sigwara. Di nga zu di rikba chuchibe nala kasing lu changi ba gombo lu chubi. Nga mawa tsoki ra karsare. Kete yoba mawa nam nga bo rangshingi chuba yoba mawa chiru pala soba tezu ina rangshingi yore, tembar yore, rangune chuba ngara zu tonga nashin yore se di koran zu tembe lu re so, chiru be lu so re so ra rangi tembe lu inbe saru ne mela te yamsa ya ke yo maru koran zu temba ka tende shedu tili ishi chene yo se wara se namba sanje be nga mawa dode bada chitra mawa semza bata zul se yo ra sanje lamla tene ne se sanje chumde degi sungbe sungla tene ane sanje lamla tene kula medamana duje tsama kyudan kenla tene chungwe ane kyugenla tele chungwa reese duje kechi gyure medaba mawa namsigora duje gyurwa changi medaba mawa namsi namba sanje be ngwa mawa tsuli sigora chebe ngwa nam cho sung nese chebe chun tanda rangshingi yo rangwane yo temba chuba yo se ngwa tembar yo be cho sungwa desigora ke yamsen reese sanje chumden degi gyudan kenla tene keba sonza rangwane yo ma reese sungba reese duje medaba ke len shindu tanda yang rangwane chuba chi yo se ade ane meyo ba reese yamsen reese sungudwa cheza ngwa mawa ke gyujenla tene keba degi rangwane yo kuba samgiyora uma tenjo adaba gyujenla tene keba degi rangwane meba samgiyora gyujenla tene ke ne midagba yinaya tanda rangwane yose de sanje chumde de songda ne gyawa rese o tisi ya tadi sis mandas
So here then, for example, for essentialists, sorry, that's what I've been saying as realists, but essentialists, this includes those kinds of outside schools as well as Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas and the mind-only school even, because, so for essentialists, the fact that a rice seedling is produced in dependence on its causes and conditions is enough grounds to claim that on analysis, it must be found to exist independently, intrinsically from its own side and in its own right. So here, for those essentialists or realists, they say that because composite phenomena are dependent upon causes and conditions, then that means that there must be something that exists from its own side. There must be some kind of intrinsic independent existence or existence from its own side. So this is the position of those types of schools, whereas the position of the consequentialists, the Prasangikas, is quite the opposite. They state that a rice seedling gains its identity in dependence on the constant change of a great variety of causes and conditions, and that this seedling, the result, has numerous parts. The rice seedling is fully established merely through its being imputed. This is a rice seedling by term and concept, independence on these parts, its colors, its shape, upper and lower parts, and so forth. So here for the Prasangikas, they would say that this rice seedling is established as something that is merely designated, merely through its being imputed. And other than that, there's no sort of independent existence from its own side or in its own right. And this is precisely connected with the fact that it is something that is dependent upon these causes and conditions, as well as on the process of designating or imputing that. So here, if one is not satisfied with that, you're not satisfied with the mere label or that mere imputation, but you look further for that which is the rice seedling, this imputed object, the kind of thing that these other schools assert must exist if something is causally produced. So you look further for what is that rice seedling, the imputed object, that you never find it either in the individual parts of the seedling or in the collection of these parts. So when, if one were to search for and try to find this kind of thing, although for the Prasangikas it's asserted as something that is merely designated on this kind of adventitious continuum of causes and conditions, but instead we're to try to find that thing. You can't find such a thing. The consequentialists thus assert that not even the slightest particle is independently established, intrinsically established. And so forth. So as we saw from an earlier verse from Nagarjuna's 60 verses on reasoning, he explains that those kinds of essentialists or realists that assert some sort of intrinsic existence or true existence, it's no surprise that they don't accept the kind of dependence of the teachings of the Buddha. They assert that kind of intrinsic existence, real existence. They're not following after the Buddha's teachings. And so it's not surprising that they don't accept that kind of dependent origination. However, those that are Buddhists, those that accept that things are impermanent, that they are momentary, all composite things are constantly changing moment to moment due to their various causes and conditions, it's quite surprising to say that they still assert this kind of existence from its own side, to try to accept that things are momentary, that they're constantly undergoing change due to their causes and conditions. It's quite a contradiction to then accept, to say that they must have existence from their own side. So that, Nagarjuna says, is what is truly surprising for those that accept the Buddha's teachings on impermanence, but yet are trying to assert some kind of intrinsic existence.
Oh, yeah, Dimedo. Oh, Kavale, oh, Randing, Mawa, Namjini, Tagwa, Rao, Rabat, Samrava. Takbe ngo da batinde tube rawa tuba yo mare shan mato sali jangba de takba samji yo bar so mai ban jangba shi takbe te de ta de rangu ne nge ba yo go be ni ju yo ba shi de ba de shero tene tenju ane sali jangba rangu ne yo ba ma yin bar rangi chashe le te ne tuba che dogje ge ta do ge tanye le te ne tuba jo la se 차셰 마부치체 네 텔이야 차로를 때네 네 똑베 디치지 예스파 따기어도 자기다 맹다 네 똑베 어디티레 삼사 삼기어라 어제는 도저히 자도게 다녔어라 자에 다녔다 로에 다녔어 때네 두번 줘봐 인세 걔나 랑윈의 두번고 네베 차베 땡데네 tenjuwa kone lula yuchis. Rangwene truban gobe tenji tene truba ase de takshi la toche, dokshi la toche, takshi dan dokshi la tene truba resi de, ne rangwandu truba de ka tunggengi tende de tenjuwa mato shandaga joshingi ma resi re. Rangwene truban go nebe trabe tende ne, tenjuwa kone lula yuchi lu shangi tetan jo meshi so se. Yenga zu karsu re. Donale yungui ba. Kanshi tenle keba te ma jese. Judan ken sobo le tene keba de. Keba ma resi ora. Kari keba ma resi ne. Tela ke rangshingi trube su keba ma resi uda. Kanshi tenle keba te ma je tela kebe rangshingi yo ma resi. Rangune trube keba yo ma resi. Ken la rale kande tongbar shese. Judan ken la rale ne kikituna rangune trube tongbar resi. Ken la rale kande tongbar shese. Kange tongni shede pagese. O tongba nye sede. Rangune trube mebe tongba la tongba sigir mato. Ko yebe tongba la tongba sigir ma resi. O ti shimba chena sudan tumbe ne tongba nye sheba resi. Ti mato tongba nye sudo kaya mengendra kona mandiri to. Ya ti chijana.
So for Buddhist essentialists, the schools other than the Prasangikas, sutras like the Rice Seedling Sutra are able to refute some gross levels of independence, such as independence in the sense of being permanent, that is not dependent upon causes and conditions. So these schools can refute some level of there being a totally independent thing because it is dependent upon causes and conditions, but they don't go to the sort of level of something being merely designated, like there's a collection of parts that appears to mind and one designates a particular object with a word, with a term and a concept. For them, they insist that the way a rice seedling exists cannot be fully established through merely being designated rice seedling. For them, the object imputed as seedling must be findable to be the objectively existent object imputed, such that you say, this is it. So for them, they don't get to this level of understanding independence as being like some kind of independence from the designating term and the thing designated. For them, they're just seeing that because things are dependent upon causes and conditions, they don't have that level of independence. But they still assert that there must be something that could be findable, some kind of objective existence or existence in its own right. So the consequentialist prasangikas, however, assert that a rice seedling is not an object that exists objectively. Rather, they posit that it exists in dependence on its parts and in dependence on the conventions that are the imputing names and concepts. So thus, only in the Prasangika school do they know how to set forth the concept of the subtle dependent arising that repudiates the notion of objective existence of an object. None of the other schools know how to do this. So here, this is like, as it is explained in the sutras. So the Buddha has said that that which is produced from causes and conditions is unproduced. It has no kind of independent or intrinsic production. What is being said here is that all phenomena are empty of existing in their own right. It's not just saying that they're empty of existence, but rather it is that kind of existence in its own right, independent of this process of designating or imputing the thing designated upon a particular basis and so forth. It is that kind of existence in its own right that is being negated, not the or objective existence, one could say, not existence altogether. And none of the other schools of the tenets know how to do this besides the Prasangikas.
Oh yeah. 당아주 디라 딘종기 각자 고수세. 단디 가르치고르스네. 딘종기 각자 고수세거든. 댄진 레버를 좋아 되게 댄진 레버를 좋아한 거 보디 상마 네 동반이르세 덴바 마두바레스 송교라 디 각자데 가르스 바 가야데 마두바레스 마두에데 가르스 땡원진교라 댄진 레버를 좋아한 거 보데서 동반이르스 코나요 말에 동반이르 송교라다 아니 코나 유추데 간주 통하나신 말에 랑원에 주베 동바 랑와도 주베 동바 송교라 가르 송교라세 땡종기 각자 먹고 주세요도 뭐 마음에 전에 땡지 레버는 좋아해서 그 랑원에 주바 가야요 말로 랑원에 주바 인수 수주고도 그래서 땡종 오마 땡죠 루체나 땡종기 땡지 레버 좋은 거부터 저게 될 때는 각자 가르가요 그래서 대ten도 가야돼 가르래서 그거라 땡고 주디 시에거라 뭐 코랑 가야 말해서 땡종 거부터 각자 땡종 거 코랑 가요 말해 네 가래 땡진 레버는 좋아인데 동방에 소에도 가르선 거래 땡진 레버는 좋아 소자 랑원에 동방에 son 거로 마도 땡진 레버는 좋아를 때 소자 다 땡데 코랑 요 말을 소고 말에서 그 개발치는 시에거라 땡종이 가장 고수스 야 얼티치 교는 너무
So here then turning to the next section, this turns to how dependent arising refutes the object of negation. So here again, this is getting at when things appear to us, the Buddha has explained that they don't actually exist in the way that they appear. Again, it says here then, therefore the existence of any object is fully established by merely being designated as such and such by imputing conventions, terms and concepts, in dependence upon your mind having apprehended its parts, and so forth to be its basis of imputation. So here, what it means for something, again, for the essentialists, for those schools, they would say that because things are dependently originated, that means that they are established to exist from their own side. So here we need to understand what it is that we are refuting. We're actually refuting that kind of existence from its own side, objective existence or existence in its own right. We're not negating or refuting the thing itself. So here, it's not the case that dependent origination negates existence whatsoever, but rather it negates, it refutes that kind of existence wherein things are not dependent upon their bases of imputation and so forth. So anything that is established as like existing in that way, that is independent of causes and conditions and are designating it as such, that is what is being refuted here, that kind of intrinsic existence or objective existence in its own right, not the dependently originated phenomena. Those are not being negated.
Oh yeah, that's the nurse chu kangshi rangi chashe so tashi so ala tenese chu kare ne digra namdu rabche ne computer rabche ne ro tina chala mangbo yora rangi dakshi sri chashe chilo pakba yora nalo tini machine dramada mangbo yora tar danchi mangbo yora o tezoli sigura rangi chashe sigura dakshi sigura ming taksa ki shirab chi korwa ngobo chi korwa dakshi chi mena namga tongbol ya di namdu rindi chi chi re se si taya chi yo marto di medo res taya yo marwa shi chi yo kora tele dakshi sigura namdu rabchi namdu chilo pakpa yore kolo yore nalo tar yore tezo kanga dakshi ra tele tenene di namdu res pa tagi yora o di takwa tsambiyeni namdu sha kore se ti maimba che namdu kadi res tado tsega dun tinal raya chi yo marwa o ti machine kanga ke lega chi gore ne namdu persung se tinal me yorwa mege kugudo me chi lega chi gudo tezo kanga chene ne domne namdu perge do se gora namdu papsu se gora ta lega chinga mangbo yora namdu si chi lega chinga si yo mara me te namdu tange kore kholo to kore machine to kore tina tar to kore lega chinga pe mangbo yora kanga lega che suna ne ta namdu do de perge do ta papsu se sha gora ma to te samji mazim bache ta namdu kandis pawre pamge namdu kadire se che ka yo mara taga cha sha jir o namdu se tene ta po samne sha jir ma to rangune di namdu de sha se chi zu zu yo mara ta chi dan kun ji den tanye do chen pe namdu chilo pa bo thong so ta de namdu lep sha se chilo tele tene pa ta gro te samde sha chora ina ta ka ba yo re se ta tong che chi yo mara ena che kanshi rang chashe so ta shir che kanshi namdu da computer kare na lega chenge rang chashe sam takshi takbe shi ko ra o ti takshi so la tene se takshi chi thong tele tene ne di chi re sha sa la gu ra tanya da gu ra takshi so la tene do che ge tanya ge wang ge se dewo se de namdu re sha de computer re sa di motor re sa ro pa she takwa sambi yusu sokba yin bar trubashi o takwa sambi yusu sokba re so ra yoda yulu de tage simba chawda tage diksa de timado da chachi ta ke yo mara yusu sokba mayin ba ne trubashi yoda ne rawa do truba rangwe ne trubashi go ra te samji sokba mara namdu yenge che yo re sen ta ka gre sen zu zu che yo mara te yo na ne namdu rangwe ne yo ba rangshing ji yo ba rang ngo yo ba rang le yo ba tembar yo ba dang dambar yo ba sutub do yo ba ta su do yo ba che su do yo ba de kang se kare ne se chora rawa do yo ba da rang ngo yo ba jo ba yin la se te dar yin ba ya o de kong de ta shi ge ba na le so sha se lo ben da wa ba ge shi ge ben da ba yo ba che du sha da ge de ba 어, 그 시계변 되면 로베 나와다 버전들 그 송샤소라. 결라 다제 자와네세. 어제도 개심벌 콩도세데. 엄마바 라게치 로베 나와다 버데 강가 엄마 탱교 세 송세데로. 저 콩게들 송샤시거라. 결라 다제 자와네세. 지당 다다 가사다 나다세 뜻을 다세 쇼라. 다단데 쇼탐제 다 메세 다데레. ते छोटम जो दा में से दे कांसा चिबुल को मारे कांसा माइन बले को यारे राव वे तांगी तेले तास गोरे तांगी से जोर पुबे तांगी नमजु तांगी ngो rangshi तांगी से जोरा रंग ngो से दो तेले दास गोरा rangwene drube tangni tele taa sigora. Ti kansa tendu kansa rangwene drube taa meba tala kansa taa mese. Kawa bumba la soba rangwene drube taa meba tala chegi taa mese sigora. Ti uma tenjo lulia. Taa ye taa mese yake. Timu mayimba shaya taa di shegora. Tela taa che chawa ne kanshi ngobu namje shenla raa male bia ngo rangshin chile segore songudwa. Ta raa male se de thara mambu yungurwa. Shenla raa male bia ngo am. Raa male bia rangshin am. Raa male bia yani tempa chuba am. Tsukdu tu chuba am. Taksu chuba. Ta mambu shegora. Tele segore se. Te meba ne taa meba waso. Rāwa tu tā me tāngi me badala chū tamche tā me kānsā tā me chū ki tā me sikri sukora. Yā, tēne rāngi ngō de rāngshī de, te me bane tā me bāwase. Tēne chū tā kānsā ki yewe nī su tō de, tā me tala chū ki tā me tā kānsā me sido kānsā yenge, me tā semjian la soba tezu, rāwa tu me badala kānsā tā me sikra. Tā kānsā ma yenge chū, Sudan, Tadan, Tidan, Roda, Reshala Soba, Namgal, the Motel Soba, Namdula Soba Tezu, Ramadu Tuba Mabadala, Chegita Mesura, Cheda Kansa Nisu Cheve, Kansa, Simjan So Yunge, or Mida Tandula Soba Tezu Sigra, Sem Mengenge, Tishin Laxel Soba, Kangba, Dollar Soba, Kato Yibla Soba Tezu Chesigra, Cheda Kansa Nisu Cheve. Utanda, Kansa Ramadu Tuba Meba, Kansa Tame, Chu Kari na Tedante Ramadu Tuba Meba, Rangune Meba, Kurangune Ke Yo Mare, Chenda Mainge Chili Pata, Lupata Shagiora, Esam Remato, Kurangune Ngadi Shevune Zuzu Sechi Yo Mare, Rangune Yobachi Tongu Razu Tondu Rangune Yobachi, Social Chashane Tavarwa. Sudu Sosu Nechi Yoba Samgido Mato, Pumbuda, Sobuda, Samba Soada, Dushida Tezol Tene Tapa Samla, Nasagi Samdro Chigmedua. I think a sober thing a sembre dici rese, Sosu Tandachi, Yodan Shagdua, Rangune, Rangle Yoba Sigdua, Rangle Yoba, Shanle Tene Tasha Samay, Konang Yoba, Sosu Mene Yoba, oh Tilia. Rangune Yoba Sigdua. Odati Shigaba Longta Telata Chawana Kashingo Namji Shala Rama Luang or Rangshindle Segurese. Tashala Rama le said the Karasedesna. Jutan Ken Shala Rama Leba Chua Samle Sigmare. Tujin Shala Rama Leba Chua de Yomare se Shandaga Hakura. Shandeliata Karishawara. Shandela Chasheta Doje Tanyete. Doje Lode. Dinamdu rese, Mengi Tanya, Dinamdu Nyambe, Lohi Tanya. Oh, the Chashe Chile Tene, Koran Maige, Kolodan Chi, Pagwadan, Kolodan Nalochi, Nalo Tene, Namdu Suru, Nalo to Sultan Taviora, Chilo Nepata, Namdu Pagwadan, Koloto Sultan Pataviora. Oh, the Tene Takwa Sigora. Ti shenla rama leba sidan doshe ki tanya la rama leba. Tanya ki wangi pa shakwa maiba. Kurang ki chashe maige chashe tuzule tene, chi pa wam nalo ki goda gegula soba tuzule tene, di namdu res pa tau yora. Oh, diri sigura kasar. Chashe ta, dakshi ham chashe la tene, doshe ki tanya ki wangi di namdu res pa tau ki doa. Oh, Tila Rama Lebecha Koran Yobayena, and the Shanla Rama Lebe Mora Shere. Shanla Rama Leshe Shandi Shegorda, Jujin Shanla Rama Letressing Mare, Koran Chashe Mambura Tesuda, and then Doji Tanya Rama Lebecha, Kokoranchi Logachi, Munzing Yuna, and the Ramune Yoba Ranshin Yoba Tempatu Seshoda, or the Yomare Shanla Rama Lebe Mosete, Shan Yenze Jujin Rama Leba. Yoba Tinder Sigmarese. Dashi Chashe Teletane, Doji Tanya Yewang Pashawa, Dogbe Wang Shasigdwa, Tanya Yewang Shakwares, Tanya do Yoba de Sigdwa. Or the Dogbe Wang Shakwares and Donald Gudwa. Nazo Medo Ida Share Kala Soba that station 메토군 도브라라 소바트 주베 시바 야고 시부 통야 되시거라 소소레 왕게 파타기 어레서라 나저 이가 메도 카시 세지 칸존도 다들 롱장 말아 대다들 시분 가면 대다 또배 왕게 샤바서 아버 닝집 시부신도 와서 야고 시부신도 와서 또가 파 이도 왕 다음에 왕바다 제바도 또 파샤위어라 또발라 마데네치 이도 와지나 상매된데 통으로 통마랑 아주 미게 통하나 시던 루토도 현대 통으로 메도레제 사이르스 통으로 마도 야보데 된데 통마도 거의 다 망다서 어때실랍니까 네 가서라 그봐도 시송 세세봐도
Yeah. So, here, then, again, going back to how dependent arising refutes the object of negation. So therefore, the existence of any object is fully established by merely being designated as such and such by imputing conventions, terms, and concepts. Independence upon your mind having apprehended its parts and so forth to be its basis of imputation. So we can take any sort of example, any kind of phenomenon, like a plane or a computer or a car or whatever it may be. We have a particular basis, those collections of parts, those things. And on that basis, we then designate or impute a particular name. And other than that sort of imputation of a name or designating with a concept, with term and concept, there's no sort of objective existence beyond that within those things. So we could think about like a plane. When we see a plane flying outside, we see sort of the external part of it and we say, oh, there's a plane. Or we're inside the plane, we see the inner part of it and we think like, oh, this is a plane. But beyond that, if we were to search for, okay, this is the plane, this thing that exists independent of causes and conditions or independent of various parts or that is independent even of our mentally labeling or designating it, we can't find anything that exists in that way. If we're trying to look within the basis of designation for the thing designated, you can't actually find it. If there were something that were existent beyond that, as it says here, anything not established in this manner as dependently designated would be posited to exist independently or to exist by way of its own intrinsic existence. So there are many different terms that we can use for this. It would be truly existent. It would be something that's like solidly existent, existent in its own right, existent in a way that is able to bear analysis or withstand analysis. So this is really important to understand, that it's this kind of existence that is being negated. Anything that is established as existing independently in this way is what is being negated here. So then giving an important quotation from Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanzas of Aryadevas, he says then, self in the term selflessness refers to the intrinsic nature of essence of things that is independent of anything else. So here, when we use this term self, sometimes we use the term self to refer to like the person or the I, and in the conventional sense, that is something that is existent. But here, this use of the term self is something that is applicable to all phenomena, that is referring to this kind of intrinsic nature or intrinsic existence independent of anything else. We can use sort of the same word that we use for self to refer to the nature of something, the sort of essence of it. And in a conventional level, those things can exist. But here, this is referring to this particular kind of existence. Self here in the term selflessness refers to the intrinsic nature or essence of things that is independent of anything else. The lack of this kind of self is selflessness. So here, this kind of understanding, the uncommon understanding of the Prasangika would be this kind of independent existence that is independent of causes and conditions, independent of parts, independent of designating on a particular basis of designation. That sort of existence is what is being refuted. And so there are various levels of subtlety, again, the Prasangika being the most subtle. But here, this, again, self is something that we shouldn't understand as like just referring to a person or animate things that have a mind and so forth, but rather this is referring to the sort of existence in relation to both animate, sentient, mind-having beings, as well as all other phenomena, objects like cars and planes and so forth. So this then any sort of existence that is independent of, so here, based on the division of the basis of selflessness into persons and objects, there is the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of objects. So here, again, there's, when we think about what it is for something to be truly existent, this sort of existence is to exist from its own side. This is the way that things appear to us, as if they are not dependent on their various causes and conditions, or dependent upon their parts, or dependent upon their being designated on a particular basis of designation. And again, the level of subtlety that is understood by the Prasangikas is not just negating a self in terms of this kind of independent or intrinsic existence that is not dependent upon causes and conditions, but rather it is the level of subtlety of recognizing that all phenomena are, but there's this process of designating on a particular basis of designation. If there was something that existed independent upon those designating terms and concepts, independent of the various parts, independent of causes and conditions, this is the kind of self that one is talking about here, that is negated. So here, again, the Buddha has quoted in other places that all arises due to the force of conceptuality. It's like when we see a pleasant object or see various beautiful things, it's not as though they are beautiful or pleasant in and of themselves in their own right, but rather it's due to our mentally designating them. Like when we see a flower, we might think, oh, that's beautiful. When a bee sees a flower, it sees it as food, and so forth. So there is, in this way, no kind of intrinsic existence, again, to get back to this very important quotation. Self, in the term selflessness, refers to that intrinsic nature or essence of things that is independent of anything else. And that's independent in the sense of not, as it continues after this, it would not be feasible for anything with independent existence to possess multiple parts or to exist independence on its parts and its imputing terms and concepts.
Oh, yeah. She so che. The Chukan she tended around to Trubachi Yuba in a Sigora. Namdu Drabchi na ko Chasheda, Doji Wangi Pasha Maguache, Koran Rangone Trubachi Yuba Yena. Namdu Diris Loga Yorba, Kolodan, Pagbadan to the Pasha, Tezuke Matona Telengo, Shanduchi Yogura. Chukan she tended around to Yuba Yena, Rangone, Namdu Sechi Yuba Yena. Ni chashe re to koya yo mar ko chashe de pasha kagre diris los chashe le los chi yo gora tele ani cha duma da che ba se koya yo mar cha to zo ti yo mar cha koran re namdu koran los chi te zo le shandu chi sha yo gora ti yo mar wa ti mene te zo le tene ta ba sam sha gora ma do shen yo mar do yo chi da che ka shi ten de rang ne tro ba rang shin ji tro ba rang ge ngo yo tro ba Tasuba, Chesuba, Chiraya, Yubachi, Yuna, Namdu Diris, Chashe, the Dashidu, Dogil, Temugoja, Pa, Yuba, Yenasigora. And it tell a Chaduma da Cheva, Chaduma da Chevana, Chaduma Latin, and Doji, Toga Pa, Tagwa Latin, True said the Comare. Toga Carta, and Mata, and the Koran engaged in Diris, Chashe, Dico, Chashe, Pagware. Di mare, di colore, di machine, di tongue cansare, di mare, di riesce a logaci zuzzo si scora, la se bacesso scora, o ti io mare. Ti io ne ti chascetta ceba rigmare, dolce che tacque a io mare. Corango coran to do ne pa mata bacia su gandi in sere, su tu vei bacicora. C'è canscette ravando io vaiena, chasce domanda ceba da. Chashe Dumala ten and Doje Jipa did talk about the Tanya Jiwanga Shagwa de Goma Resigora. Tanya Jiwanga Shagwa Maiba Kora Yeshogara Yogura. Gashila Tene Yobala Chadumada Jeva Yedu Kursosa. Tene Tagwa Yena Chadumada Jeva Dogel Turkure. Tene Tagwa Maina Kokora Chatu the Pasha, Telelosu Korachi Yokura. Tina Ani Chashela Turmaguba. Doji le te me guba, Koran di res, los munzici escorva, o ti me resigora, mia, ti vado ciguna.
So here again, I'm finishing that quotation and then beginning on 28, it says, it would not be feasible for anything with independent existence to possess multiple parts or to exist independence on its parts and its imputing terms and concepts. So here, if we have some kind of existence that exists in its own right or truly exists, then like say, take, for example, a plane, one could set aside all of the various parts. If there is some sort of plane that exists independent of those parts, you set aside the wheels, the exterior, and so forth. There needs to be something else that one can point to that can say that is the plane, separate and aside from the parts. If it has that kind of independent existence, then the plane needs to exist independent of those various parts. So when we set aside all of the parts, what can we find to point to that is the plane? Like if we set aside the wheels and the body of it and the person flying it and so forth, what can there be left? So if there were this kind of independent existence, there would have to be something that can be found, something that is able to bear or withstand analysis, independent of our designating it, independent of its various parts. So again, when we have like something like plane, we would have to be able to find that thing that is the plane, independent of all of the various parts, independent of our dependently designating that or using terms and concepts in order to designate that as plane. So if something existed from its own side, it's not necessary to depend upon its basis of designation or depend upon those various parts. If something has that kind of existence in its own right or objective existence, then it cannot depend upon various parts. So it continues here to saying to exist independence on something else requires having parts. So when we have this kind of dependent existence, you always have something that is dependently designated on a particular basis of designation, and therefore it includes having parts.
뭐야? 다 된다 됐어. 다 된다 돼 양보 땡해고도 가서래서 가서 다 됐어. 이거래. 대진 레버리 좋아 간테네 동반이도 사시급 송구도 뒤측되네 예버전에 하고 그래. 차셰다 덕시다 되sol에 땡고도 아니 덕시기 타녀를 땡고도 대tenje 대수강가 렐네네 지 바디레 디마레세고도 tenje 레버리 좋아 가셔라. 되네 동반이도 셔. 저랑은에 동바레셔라. 랑은에 동그면에 tenje 렐게 고구모도 마보도 로바게 되고 말아. tenje 레버리 좋아 가 되네 동반이도 셔서. 저 랑은에 주베 동바레서거라. 다는 그 매르에서는 매 말에서 Tene tene dagbade chashe da tesole tene dokje yepa tene dag doase dage yuju zobare sigora ti dage chimba chegore ti mainge tawachine yanja kagre se che yo mare ngobu kanga dagare kansa dagarwa soboda semda chowa da chichi goda chi pajure chine ngamba chi karil tene chi dagarwa ti tane pa te samli wa shagure mado tele los ke yo mato tanda tenjen deber jonga kas chashe mambo ta shin do chela tenje tezu de rene ne dire de mare si sha ko do was gora tenjen de ba jo te rangwe trube tongba re si gora tenjen deber jo tene tongba ni de che ta na rangwe tongba re te na ta mer besna mindo as chashe de mo da koran mindo as o yo re si gora tene tene dabade chashe tezole tene le va dagi doase o tagba tezamli namru shagurese tene tina kolo da chimba damda mambu yoto o tinde karsore tene dabade tini ume laminos so umatere rangone truba yo mare tagbe tada treso tenjin rebare jonga samla chawa ronga de shagu yore chebe thale treso te takse tangi de trebe use de tira tilo ume lamse gre esgra o ti de kandim badia te chilam
So this is a very important point to understand here, as it is said in Nagarjuna's fundamental verses on the middle way, that whatever is dependently originated, that is explained to be empty. So here, whatever is dependently originated in the sense of being dependent on its basis of designation and that kind of imputing the force of that imputation, it's empty of existence from its own side, empty of that kind of autonomous or independent sort of existence. But then one could ask, well, is it totally non-existent? No, there is that dependent designation exists. Things are designated in dependence upon their various parts, upon their bases of designation, and that is the extent of their existence. Whether it is like our 5 aggregates of form and feeling and so forth, or all of those external various objects, horses and cows and whatever, the extent of their existence is completed in their being merely designated. If we search for something beyond that, some kind of existence that is independent or from its own side, that is what cannot be found. So all phenomena then exist in dependence upon that process of designating on a particular basis of designation. But again, if we were to ask, well, does that mean that it's totally non-existent? That is not the case. So here again, to exist in dependence upon something requires having parts. So things are dependently designated on their particular bases of designation, and that is the extent of their existence. So this continues saying that the path of dependent designation, this is the middle way. So this negates a kind of extreme of total non-existence, or an extreme of like reified existence. Dependent designation is then the middle way, the sort of the path that exists free of those two extremes.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, that is so. Yana Nyugutabu Ramado Ranking O Neba Yona Sura, Nugu Yena Kasa Yenada, Namdu Yenada, Nobu Kandeshina, Ko Ramado Tubachi Yone Ranking O Tichi Chan Raya Yona Sura, and it Kujinda, Tashi Joaso, Juda Kenda, and it Tashi Pige Sajumelula Soba Karina Tazula Sura, Joaso Dube Ngole Loshina. There's a passion, the loss, still a loss, Yachi Yoko, the Eswara. Rawadu Yena Sewada, Namdu Rangune, Rawadu to Rangune, Rangshinki Yabayena, and then Namdu Chashe to Zukanga, La Maduba Tanda ko Loso, Dimar, Tandire Sichi Corridor. Oh, the Loshina, Rani, Yangarwa, Kora Beloso, Chashe to Pasha, Dimare, Dire Chiragua. Ni Yangarwa Korachibu Loso. Yangarwa Bangashido se, Yangarwa Bashido, Yangarwa Konalichi Ragurese, Dashida Doshido Zuke, Menayako Muzicia Yogosara. Kuba Loshido, Kuba Nekuba Yenayase, Teda Mayan Barsa, or Tele Yo Madesivara. Jambata Busu, Namduta Busu Yena Susone, and Segen Dube, Tangi do Yese, Segerwa, Sai Joa, May Joa Servata, Lugi Takwe Chatazola, Sai Joa Segdoa, Chala Sobatazoli Chui Joa Segora, and it trade Dozola, May Joa Serva, Lungijoa, Pugan Namgo Tong Santazuda, and the Lunga Tezo, Sa Chu May Long, Namgasu de Tong San del Sigora, Kobena Tong San Goro Uta Sagora. Chilo Namgat Sigo Mare. Oh, Jenny. Segan do it, Tani do you dese. The dada trainer ranking o Mineba Yembese. Chunam tutu do you, Rangune Yoba Messidose, Kansar of Jishabayena. Oh, the Sosulugicha, Sa Chu Me Lo Namga, Namshila Soba, Tazo come true, Sa Chu Me Lo Namga, Namshila Soba, Tazo. Dubal tene and pa tata and tata said the shark with the Esigora. Oh, the Nicarita. Dube Tanya Duge, the data trainer ranking more, Medeba Yembe, Chunam tutu to yoji rangune yoba mesitosa. Tone truba, Dakshida Chashal Tone truba, Doshile Tone truba yoje. Ko rangune, Nadi is Rangan to Trubachi, Sigmare, Umare Sigora. That day young Kansa Sidi, Rangune Meverete, Dakshito to Yan Yore, Samne Te Yomarwa. Dakshi Soborwa. Sobo Rangune Yunayas, Luis Kibi Lude, Chazan. La Tushin Miki Toya, Miki Ombu, you can never umbu, neumbu, che umbu, la soba. There's a kanga yungaji seura, nalo, nanja the kanga yora. And Lu said the Kadiresana. Nachili Munji che yomar, call Chasha Mambu yora. Satan, Pakbatan, nalo, trata, chigri. There's a samala Tushin, then the shower mother yomata. Dakshikora ya Rangune Matuvare. Namdu Sidu, Rangune Medu de Tati, nalo, Kolodan. Chi tuzu riri ne ranguni yibe soli chi tongdo ya dakshi sido ti zoe chigba re. Chitar kyoji dagin dushi ne sheba deshi kuala lo charcha songdo. Soso tola samne sam teyo re. Ngune shena. Soso sete nga sete. Sopo da semda soa da sopo le chashe mamu shivichi yora. Tezu le tuji reni shagura. Ane sa chu me lo namga namshi le sopo tezu le come true double ten tagra. Utang Gudwa, long le tengiora. True Gudwa, main Juma Gudwa. Oh, and it's Lugi, Tabu Chachi Quarter, Tala Soba Chua Quarter, and a long Utang Sagi, Tongba Korwa, Tongba Manishidura, Tongsa, Utansa. So Kibu come to Dubachir. Kibu de come to Sobal and Dubala Tenipatavi or so, mid of Sinara. No. Kibu come to Dubachir. Oh, yeah, that is. Oh, Kawaleson. Yoba Messito, didn't matter. That Chamela Tenjunda, Tanya Miron Lase. Chachi Chigumangage, Neko, Tanya do Yoba, that Tenjua Sigmare. The end that Tenju Lula to Den Chame Yomare. Sheba Kaji Chamesero, Chameba Yomar, Chashi in Jimmy Yogura. Chashi Megune Yon Kora Ranzu to such Yosara. Rangune Rangshingi Yodugara. Nambalia to the Chameda to the Kelly or the Umabag to the Chamekeli Marwa. To the Chachi Chigumanga to United to Rangune Trubadugara. Chamela Tinjunda Tanya Beton Mirola. Tinjunda Tanya Beton, Donla Chaje da Church to me Dangi to Yoba, wrong essay. Tinjunda Tanya Gitana, and it's Chaje Chamabu Yoga Yoshore. Church in a Chashe to my Yoga Tangiche Yoshore. Yoba Roga Rawado, Yoba Miriso, Rawado Yoba Rangwine Yoba, Tembato Batende Yomaras. Tena Tinju in Bejusan Gise, Rawado Trubam, Rangwine Yoba Gobandine, Subject Tala Tardugi, Rigbayinoso, Oma Tenju Lula Odi. Tinju in Bejusan Rangwine Trubetongbade, that Tartu Saturday. Tente de res ora. Tente de la Rebecca, who tended Tenzi Sudo, Taraj Tonaco, Tenzi Debar Joe, Kudan Kele, Kedan Kiluta, Taxida Chashel, Ten Kotuda to Lutelia, Ralene, and Tomba Shekuyorno. Then Tenju in Bejusangi, Rangone Yaban Goba Dini, Tashi Sabla, Tardugi Rigba, you know, ah, Tadaria. Look at it, long the transition. So, yes, let's sure go. Yeah, what is Kuna?
No.
Long the transition.
So here then, again, to put this another way, it says then, do so. So to pick up again from the text, it says to exist, again, to put this another way, were a sprout, for example, to exist independently, with an essence that you could find, then it would have to exist only in isolation without depending on causes and conditions, and would not be identified as an aggregation of the elements and so forth that serve as a basis of imputation. So here, whether we take a sprout or a person or a plane or any other sort of object, if there is something to be found that exists independently, some sort of essence that is independent of, again, it exists in isolation without depending on causes and conditions, including that kind of process of designating. If that were the case, then we would have to be able to find something apart from that basis of designation, apart from all of those various parts and so forth, that we can point to as being that thing, as having that kind of existence. So when it comes to like a seedling or for example, a person, they are just merely designated with these sorts of independence upon that basis of designation, independence upon the various designating terms and so forth. That is how we can posit a person. Or like if we take the example of a body, if you want to sort of find that body, that form that we then give the name body is an aggregation of all of the various elements. Here it explains that it's an aggregation of the 8 elements that'll come in the next here, continuing in the text, it says, however, this is not the case. Instead, forms such as seedlings exist as entities that are an aggregation of the 8 substances. So here, whether we use the example of the 8 substances like earth, water, fire, wind, or we look at like, for example, the person as being an aggregation of the 6 kind of elements, adding to those empty space and consciousness. When we try to find such a self or an I, we can't find something that exists independent of that basis of designation. And there is no self or no I that is independent of all of those various parts. Like, for example, we need to have the sort of solidity of body. We need that earth element. We need to have heat. We need to have our breath going. We need that element of wind. We have to have the empty sort of space to allow for that breathing. And so in this way, a person and what it means to be a person, the existence of a person is dependently designated upon all of these various different things. Now, again, when it comes to this sort of positing this, however, this is not the case that there's that kind of independent existence. Instead, forms such as seedlings exist as entities that are an aggregation of the 8 substances. In the absence of those substances, they would no longer exist. There's nothing that we can point to, whether it's in a seedling or a person, that is independent of the various parts that make it up. So therefore, objects exist dependently and cannot exist objectively from their own side. So if a thing were partless, it would be untenable for it to exist dependently. Once an individual phenomena exists dependently and conventionally, it is tenable for it to have parts and to have a nature that is manifold. Therefore, something being a dependent arising refutes its having an independent or objective existence. So here, if something, again, according to the Prasangika school, there's no assertion of, say, partless particles or temporally partless moments of consciousness, because such things can't exist. For things that are conventionally existent, that have this kind of existence that is dependent and dependently designated, dependently originated, that refutes, that negates there being some kind of a partless basis of designation. So if things were existent from their own side or existent in their own right, perhaps there could be partless particles, but because there is no such existence that is independent in this way, everything therefore has parts. So here, then, this reasoning is profound and subtle and the ultimate reason for this kind of refutation. So here in the Prasangika system, this reasoning of dependent origination is called the king of reasonings, because it is in dependence upon that one can refute the kind of objective existence that is being, we are mistaken with respect to. So here, again, this is referred to as like the king of reasonings.
Again, we
왜
cannot
again 안서 곧 고기민두 nga 고기민두.
더 그것도 해.
하나 거기.
그거 면도 사래. 얼려.
2단계 망못
어야, 다데서. 대다 공도 셰바다르. 설류 장바 깨베 추다. 예베 추 데이터블로 공내에서 덤바 산제 좀 된데 설류 장바를 쓰네. 네 결론 남려야. 데데 송바레스 카르 송바레스네 수 텐진 데버는 좋아. 셰바데서. 교단 깬라 텐진 데버 좋아. 데 야보지 신 소나 송고라. 아니 동바데 셰용거라. 네 최다 최파괴 람야라 게다. 산제자네 통화를 송무세 산제자 토버ጆ알 소바 어떻게 송어레세 지다 산제세데 로드게서 소데 테코나니라 로드게벌시기도아 테코나니 네루 타두들 로드게바 계속 용그레스 텐데 자네 드거라 야야나 최다 산제지 네루 타두자 통화죠 그래서 텐데를 자네 드고 그래 소소 대다르 때제 레버를 좋아 때제 레버를 좋아다 동배 춘디네세 다 산지 좀 되게 동반이다 텐데게 남샤지 소요르도 어디 사바 스제 지게 좀게서데 스제 지 산지 사바 참샤바 텐데게 말에 송겨라 시겨라 대다 때제 레버를 좋아 동배 춘디네세 때제 레버를 좋아다 근데 랑원에 주베 동배 춘디네세 때제 레버를 좋아도 군주브로와 랑원에 주베 동바데 던담으로와 군주다 가주 때제 레버를 좋아 쳐도도 랑원에 주바 템바 주바 랑원에 여바 랑신기 여바다시 통구여래 되나시 통화데 템바에 삼겨와라 어디 군주베 쳐서라 군주 땡진기 거로 템바리 여바 나게 쳐서 때제 레버를 좋아다 동배 쳐서 던담베 템바 네루 타두데 텐데 마레 랑원에 동바를 아주 통주내시 템바 마레 딜레션도 랑원에 동배 추유데세 템바니가 남샤송에 줘라 데네 송거라 데네 대화르식베 돌라네바 랑와도 샹라 세워 템바를 제바 인기세 산제 좀 된데게 아니 돌라 된데제레데 요레세 데네 산제 좀 된데 무슨도 세네 라와게 코네 송바제르마도 샹다지나르 치셰샤 로 리지기 쇼나르 셰샤 텔리 차샤고 그래 테 인기레스 텐데 송바 마레스거라 코라게 라와도 무슨도 세네 아니 샹라 템바제바레스거라 대화르식 베톨라 네바 라와도 샹라 돌라 네바 라게 무슨도 세 아니 식바데 샹라 템바제바 인기에서 템바제바 참레 마도 데사도 쮸반제바치 마레스거라 산제 직대 산제 남 직대에 칸로 쮸라로 마쮸야로사 산제 샤자투 바타부 단다 직대에 캄델이야 케바 마지바체 델이야 쮸버 동에마 산제 직대에 직대도 쮸야로 산제 쮸네 쮸 송바레 템바니 남샤 송바레 이나 마쮸베 네갑시 이나 그 템바니 남샤 테라 레데요르마도 티 멤버즈 산제 페네 사바스샤와 텐데게 마롱을 내술레테 요요바레스거라 키나 코 티싱게 요네 땡게데 산제 페네니 템바레스 텐데 꾸저라 산제 남지데도 쳬로 마촌로 쳬 남제 땡지 데바르 조에 군주베 ngoam 내주데 다세 군주 가라조 담바 템바 나웨 내수 군주 템바 데다세 아니 라테 네루 타도데 랑웨네 트베 동베 담담베 ngoam chuni denesa detarneba kona imbecheroso denashi dala neba re sadu cheba jeba chimare se atandare mobe nesu da tumba mobo juda kenla tene kisu da dakshida chashele tene trupsi tuzole shishane ane kunzu da tanda benelude sanje sombare se te chenje sene mobo kora nesu le yochi sombare mado mebachi ane sadu cheshabachi mare so ya tichola.
So here, Then turning back to the Rice Seedling Sutra itself, it says then the Buddha was considering the above mentioned way that a rice seedling is produced. When he explains this to the monks in this sutra, that the rice seedling is produced from causes and conditions and exists by way of depending on its basis of imputation and imputing terms and concepts. When he looked at a rice seedling and told his monks that whoever understands the dependent arising of a rice seedling understands the ontological status of the Buddha jewel and the Dharma jewel. So here, it's really when one understands well the way in which, say, a rice seedling is dependently originated, then one too will be able to understand the sort of ontological status of all things, and as well as the sort of eightfold path and the teachings of the Buddha and so forth. So here, the Buddha is encouraging one to expand their intelligence or increase their wisdom with respect to this in order to then also understand the way in which the Buddha jewel and the Dharma jewel exist. So here, the Buddha did not invent the way of dependent arising and the way of emptiness. Here, it's not as though the Buddha created this or fabricated this, but rather he just clearly taught through his own power without others what in fact exists. For whether Buddhas appear in the world or not, the dependent arising of phenomena, their conventional reality, and their lack of objective existence, their ultimate reality, remain unchanged. So here it is, again, we have these two levels of truth, the sort of conventional being the dependent origination of phenomena, and ultimately they're lacking any kind of objective or independent autonomous sort of existence. And by way of understanding these two truths, one is then able to sort of follow after the Buddha's teachings. It is then the case, though, that the Buddha discovered reality. He did not invent the way of dependent arising and the way of emptiness, but rather it is the case that the Buddha, through his own power, through his own meditation and effort and so forth, came to understand that the way that things actually are, and based upon that then taught the way that things are to others. Whether Buddhas come into the world or not, this is the reality. It's not as though the Buddha made this thing up or sort of created it, but based upon his knowledge was then able to give an explanation. So this is the sort of the teachings of the Buddha accord with the way that things are. It's not that something has been fabricated or created. Their nature remains unchanged in the presence of Buddhas or in their absence.
Oh yeah, dan de da ga tawa chu sense to wa dan ra zo ge sanje chum de ge ken ne ngo sum de ken ji se ne song ba da song ba inde dan ra zo ge ti nang ba che we ne ko sanje chum de sanje re de ra zo rim bi lo chang ba yin na sanje ye yo ba chi she yo ra na zo ta ba re shi ko du stand ge che de ba tar to be ki bu de shen da che de ma ne tang bu ne yin ba che nga zo tang bu ne che thoma tanda duste shisha chiti marta sanje trame ba yora ngara zo lo changna ya tongele thare yoba langdor ji ne malu ba kimbe sheja yoba ngara zo le sanje ji ru chera nga zo semde sobo de sharu de che ji pumbure de semde se shi rigba chi ne lu shege nange se che sigdo webene zu she tumu mai ben bando wa deba ina da tata ina da maumba ina da samultan ko shibuji shen yora o ti inde ti ya ye chen sona sangbu cha de ya ke ta shi je ne lu la mongba se ne o ti chen ne nga zo rim ya tar chen ne tar sangge gi yore se ti shi sha che song yo no ti mena song yo marwa ngara zo nge ma na shi du ste de ta wa de na tembanyi namsha da chanju semda samlu sangbu cha top chimbu kone kondu peya da shirab ji cha de kone kondu pe ne kanga shemba so ye samlu ta ye yo mara yo ye mena o te nangba ti yo ye ke de gora sembi ran shi ye se te tuma nam ne lubro ase sem de ko tandam konro yo ra nga je yo re chado yo re ne lu ma shimba chinji lo dun zimba mambu yo ra ke mambu yo re ina sem kora ge rang shi de yo sa wa se tang ji che re so ra namga de tangya rangshin chere. Ina timba da chi chu da de mambu ya de nyoya yorno. Chu nyokba de kupa de nyoksha yorde. Ina kokora yabu je shana nyokba de pa tane tangya rangshin chen yoya yorwa. O de sembi rangshin wesawa. Timba namne luburu ase. Timba luburu imba de ngazu tos rob za haku do. Mi kondu chabu shibuchi na ko seba kom na ane kondu chungru chi seba kom ya shu chir dura ane ngaje chambuchi na ngaje ma seba sepa ti chene ko tra dura yora trato chambuchi ge chi mi shanda trato che ngaranchi bu ma do shanda ya putin de megu samsa trato che ge chi na ko trato kyo shi ji samlu ta ne nyor dura yora ti ngaranzu to so do ha ku do so changba che ne ya tra dura yora Kambu kaga shingi yo mari ine chi jiten kamli yone kaga kanga sa yigri chi lab chi che pa che su che ya she shu de jiten kamli she yun chen de she che to zo tar chi pe ta chi chu mambu shin ya duwa o ti na shi chi ngobo la ya yaga da yaga chok tu jiba mambu yo re che ra yang mambu yo do pyu chung le jan pyu chung wa ka shi jiten de na tong jiten ngobo la pyu tu chung wa yak shu人不信给你要学，咱其实人但其实等这有耳朵，行动拿来过养你的就蛮不用不多，天天拿给身边强不起呢，没来人不要着的要的，这个的蛮不住就有这个当，我天天都开始说的，天等到了等个人就给到我车库要的。上了当过了，前半年就光过了，开始光过了，让他做下届养着过了。在那些东北人来说，我们那觉得水果园了，我得到我出去这些园了，那原地去送山了，我得救。
So here, then the next section is how to seek the view. So here, the Buddha has seen directly this kind of truth and then taught that truth to us. And so we too, it's not as though like the Buddha was primordially enlightened and we are just kind of stuck here in samsara. It's not as though the Buddha, I mean, there would be no point in the Buddha teaching to us if we could not also achieve that same kind of a state. If we were all just kind of stuck in samsara and there were no way to get out of that, then there would be no point in the Buddha giving this. And it's not as though the Buddha is fundamentally different from us. We all have this kind of Buddha nature. We have the capacity to become fully enlightened. It is the case that our mind has the nature of being clear and knowing. It is again, we will cast off our sort of impure bodies, but that in mind, that continuity of mind remains, and that has the potential to reach full enlightenment. So we had this kind of clear and knowing nature in the past. We have this now. We will have that in the future. And if we work to remove the kind of obstacles, if we work to actually develop those kinds of good qualities, that is the purpose of the teachings. There's no other purpose. Otherwise, there would be no reason for the Buddha to give these teachings at all if it weren't the case that we couldn't work with our mind, but rather we can. We have that kind of ability, and we have the ability to work on, say, the method side, increase more and more our love and compassion and bodhicitta and those kinds of good qualities, as well as our wisdom, our intelligence, by developing that over time. So as it is said, the nature of mind is clear light. The stains are adventitious. They haven't penetrated the nature of our mind. They aren't such that they're inextricably mixed in with our mind, like the same way that the sky can be filled with clouds or water can be made dirty, but it isn't the case that those sort of stains penetrate into the nature of that. Our mind has this nature of clear light, and it is such that we are able to completely purify and eliminate those adventitious stains if in stages we develop and work to improve and work with our mind. We have the capacity to become fully enlightened like a Buddha. And there we can know sort of on a smaller scale examples from our own experience. We can see someone who is, say, maybe very angry, or someone who is really jealous, or someone who is really prideful. And based upon seeing the defects of those attitudes, like someone who's always really jealous and just wants bad things for other people and only good for themselves and so forth, by seeing the defects of that and gradually working on it, they can become less jealous. We can see that there is the capacity to transform and work with our mind. So starting with that kind of knowing that the nature of our mind is such that we can actually make improvements in our knowledge and our conduct and so forth. This is something that is the most valuable kind of thing. This is the best kind of sort of jewel or wealth that we could have. We can gain the most valuable kind of state from working with this natural nature of our mind. So if we do make an effort to develop those kinds of good, positive qualities and eliminate those kinds of stains, we have the capacity to actually become Buddhas ourselves. And so we do this through developing a practice of the method side of the path, as well as, like in this section here, seek out the view, seek to develop our wisdom, emulating and following the Buddhas of the past.
Oh yeah. Oh, da tawa chuchu. Lamda debi namsha michuk basura. Lam tang debi namsha michuk. Lam ya ko kaso. Ngesong ne che ngodo lami koba toptene ya lam kombal tene tarwa toptene ya tamje kimbe koba topche lam mambu tuye yorton shirab ki cha ta sambu changi de sangar chene lam ki rimba mambu chi ya tuye yorwa kende lam dan debut namsha mechuk ba dese lam de na tele tene mambu yonjun debut namsha de manora che chuksu de nordora Manora che yabuchi tanla bipsu Manoa che yabuchi yuala tambu tawa tanla bipsu le rale bare sigora tanga ju de tanda karsore midabare kudan kenle tene kebare juroche re sidu so semda charne taku yora semle kyuju tanya tandalia chamba ni chi chanju semsera midaba da chi tame ba da chi tezu shegiora di karsore sheshe nezu kyangya shebe chedu shegyo mara taina ngara zo pecheta du samsang tende doa nezu ko kyangya shenya mato soso semde dan jawa mashana ane sheshe kyangya tse dengari sire sora sheshe nevlu tse mato te inji meji mune chene semdan rel go yora tanda ngazu semgi dende je samde doa tangzi tabwa jingi doa se te mare da se meda bare dustu saml tangure se shegyo ora chamba nyingchi dan tuzo tambu ngazu dire doa mili chado chigi doa susumado samgi me doa tende marita tende dire samur tangure te chana rangda shen kangal pengire se tabgi cha sambu cha de shedi ta tawa shegi ne susu samla gyuwa doya chido susu tande samgi samur tangda di doa di marin di re se yake tangur te shegi wara mato shiche nezu sam tenla bebe chido shegi yo marwa o te sonza ko lamdan drebu se de rang rimji ya chwe go bata ya je tangen chi shisha chen de shegi wara lamdan drebu namsha mechuk ba shi tawa tenla bechula ra shi tawa ngobu korang ge ne chu de tenla ba tele tatanda samdaro ngobu la tatanda samda norgu wara simjen la jawa chi du ta tele ya samla tanda da randa shenda tada norgu wara tezu gyurju ta tandala de tembanyi da tabda shirab ki kachi shegi wara shi tawa tenla bechula ra lebe tawa tenla bechu nese ore otiba do chi shena tambo anti odi shena kametya.
So here then on this section of how to seek the view, it says an unmistaken exposition of the path and its resultant states depends on how you ascertain the philosophical view of phenomena. So here there are various sorts of paths, those kinds of paths or methods by which we are able to in sequence gain a good rebirth as a human or a god, those paths by which one is able to gain the state of liberation, and those paths paths by which one is ultimately able to become a Buddha for the benefit of others. These paths involve developing our wisdom, our understanding, as well as the kind of method side, that fundamental goodness. And we need to have a kind of unmistaken path. If we have an unmistaken or a mistaken sort of exposition, then we are going to go astray. But here, when we read the various teachings of the Buddha, like for example, that all impermanent things arise from causes and conditions, this is to counteract our view of things as being permanent. Or when we hear teachings on love and compassion, this is in order that we might develop those qualities within ourselves. Although we often talk about sort of this ascertaining the philosophical view of phenomena, the Buddha's teachings are not just to sort of know things out there, but it's about connecting with our own mind. We need to actually, when we are, say, being taught impermanence, recognize how we hold things to be permanent and work on our own sense of grasping at things as permanent through those teachings on impermanence. Or by recognizing the sort of defects of thinking only of ourselves and only working for our own aims, we then begin to see the benefits of cherishing others and developing love and compassion and so forth. But all of these things are explained not just to sort of give a story about external things, but to be connected with our own mind, to see the way that things are in order to correct the way that we normally see things. So the Buddha teaches things like the two truths, the various paths and results and so forth, the methods by which one is able to attain them, by in a way that we are really to apply them to our own way of thinking and our own mind. It shouldn't just be that we are viewing these as things that are explaining like a story or something that is out there. Rather, these teachings are in order to really work with our own mind. So our time is up for today, so we will stop there for now.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of wholesome's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. To this merit may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious holy mind not therefore rise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forever. Thank you, Ginla, for your very precious comments. And thank you, Katrina. And for everyone online, see you again next Thursday morning at 8 a.m.